Assalamualaikum dan selamat pagi Puan Koroner. Dengan izin, nama saya Ahmad Sazali, Timbalan Pendakwa Raya Ahmad Sazali bin Omar, selaku Pegawai Pengendali. Sama-sama saya, Timbalan Pendakwa TPR Noralis, TPR Nur Hafiza dan TPR Noratika. Dan rakan-rakan rakan-rakan pelajar saya dan yang mewakili keluarga mangsa, Encik Saktivel, Cik Louis Azmi dan Cik Lydia Eng, manakala bagi pihak The Dusun, Datuk Dr. Gudil Singh dan Cik Alif Benjamin. Hari ini ditetapkan untuk Mahkamah membuat keputusan verdict berkenaan dengan inquest ini.
Amirul, slide please. Okay. Dah. Okay, next. Tak boleh ni ke? Very good morning. Okay, thank you for everybody for coming today. As Tuan Sazali said, today is fixed for decision on inquiry into death of Nora and Quoirin. Actually, I have prepared a full ground of my finding, but I'm not going to read it in full. I will try my level best to summarize it for the purpose of today's proceeding. Okay, next. I am aware that there are so many theories and speculations over the death of Nora and today I believe those who are making the theories or speculations are expecting my findings today to be on their favor. Unfortunately, that's not my role here. Next. My duty as envisaged under section 337 of the Criminal Procedure Code is primarily to ascertain first, when did the deceased die? Second, where did the deceased die? Third, how did the deceased die? Fourth, in what manner the deceased die? And fifth, whether any person is criminally concerned in the cause of the deceased death. Next. So before I proceed, I would like to quote what was said by Tun Abdul Hamid Muhammad, former Chief Justice of Malaysia, in his speech, Resolving Constitutional Issue is Constitutional Court the Answer, presented during the legal discourse on international human rights law in UiTM Merbok, Kedah, 11 April 2007. The Chief Justice said, before going any further, let me first make this pertinent point because it will also have a bearing on my view. The point is, I am not an academician, I am only a worker. As a judge, my job is to ascertain the facts, determine the issues, look for the relevant law, and where the law is clear, apply it. Of course, giving reason for it. As far as we are concerned, it is the reason that matters. To the public who do not read the judgment, it is the result that matters, whether it is what they would like it to be or not. If it is what they would like it to be, they say it is a good judgment, no matter how bad the reasons are in law. If it is not what they would like to be, they say it a bad judgment, no matter how sound the judgment is in law and on the facts. That is one of the occupational hazards that judges have to face. Where the law is open to interpretation, speaking for myself, I try my best to give a reasonable interpretation, taking into consideration where relevant, the local circumstances, public interest, and so on. Hence, in Mio Atikur Rahman, I said, justice is blind, yes, but not judges. There should not be. Next. Inquiry into the death of Nora and Quoirin. There was a total of 48 witnesses testified over the period of 24 days, commencing on 24th August 2020 and ended on 10th December 2020. Next. I must thank a team of 4 assisting officers led in the beginning by Tuan Muhammad Iskandar Muhammad bin Ahmad and now by Tuan Ahmad Sazali bin Omar. And I would like to also thank to all counsels who involved in this inquiry on behalf of the family and Berembun Resort Sdn Bhd. And before I forget, thank you very much also to BTN, Bahagian Teknologi Maklumat, the IT department from POJ, making it happen on evidence given by Zoom. Next. Finally, I would like to take this opportunity to express my sincere sympathy to the families of Nora N. Next. Brief facts. Nora N. Quoirin, his now deceased, aged 15 years, was last seen alive at about 10 p.m. on 3rd August 2019 at Sora House, the Dusun Resort, Pantai Negeri Sembilan. She and her family arrived in Malaysia on the same date for family vacation at the resort. The next morning, 4th August 2019 at about 8 a.m., Nora N's father, Sebastian Marie Philip Quoirin, discovered her missing from her bag. Nora N family and staff on the resort had tried to locate Nora N, but all without success. In the meantime, Hanim Ahmad Madaj, owner of the resort, went to the Pantai police station to lodge a missing report. Next. The police had then carried out initial searches for the missing Nora N in response to the said report. Simultaneously, the police had activated criminal investigation into her disappearance. Nora N's disappearance had sparked an extensive search thereafter involving various agencies and hundreds of people. Sniffer dogs and drones had also been deployed in the said operation. On 13th August 2019, the naked body of Nora N was found in a stream that was 2.27 meter wide and 8 centimeter deep by a local team of hikers at the palm oil plantation near the resort. Next. The body was flown to Hospital Tengku Jaafar, Seremban Negeri Sembilan. Nora N's identity was confirmed by her parents and DNA analysis. It was an uncontentious fact. A post-mortem was carried out on 14th August 2019 by Dr. Xiu Feng and Dr. Hanif bin Mahmud. Both forensic pathologists affirmed Nora N's cause of death as upper gastrointestinal bleeding due to duodenal ulcer complications with perforations. Next. This is the map sketched by the investigating officer, which is marked as Exhibit EI9. Based on the distance between A, which is the Sora house, and X, which is the location where Nora N's body was found, the family does not believe that Nora N could have wandered off on her own accord, as she had a brain condition that affected her balance and coordination. They could not understand how she could have got out the Sora house and ventured out of the resort herself. Hence, the theory of kidnapping remains the view of the family. Next. Nanti dulu. When asked by Professor Datuk Dr. Gudia Singh Nija, learned counsel for resort, about the reasons that made them to think would anyone want to abduct Nora N for, this is the answer by Mr. Quoirin. Amirul, play video clip 1. Video clip 1.
So my question, my point is, what reason do you think would anyone want Nora for? That perspective, why would anyone want Nora?
Okay.
For a ransom? Is it some other purpose? From that perspective.
Well, obviously, that is, these are points of speculation, but I think the reasons for kidnapping a child are well documented. It is a common problem in many places around the world. Obviously, you mentioned one that is well known. Ransom is one. Obviously, child trafficking is another reason, and there are many different routes of motivation for child trafficking, whether it's sexual abuse or organ abuse, or frankly, child enslavement. The other thing is that not all abduction is necessarily premeditated or motivated by criminal activity. I think it's important to consider the theory that Nora was abducted by someone who perhaps hadn't intended to abduct a child. That could be because they wanted to commit another crime, such as burglary, or if Nora, for instance, had got outside, if she'd encountered someone by chance, did they see it as an opportune moment to abduct someone? Did someone panic? Not all crime. In fact, most crime isn't necessarily premeditated. I think the final reason that I would say that I'd be aware of is that I'm aware of cultural practices in a number of countries, and Malaysia is one of them, where children are abducted for spiritual or cultural practices, and whereby a vulnerable child would be, in particularly, even more attractive person to abduct, and that is, as I say, to do with local ritual, local cultural practice, and I've read quite a bit about that. I have to say, since you asked me the question, do I have any opinion on which of those routes of someone taking Nora, whether it was deliberate or not, whether she was specifically targeted or not?
Okay. So Mr. Den, after that question and answer, Mr. Quoirin was then asked by Puan Atika Sapari, the assisting officer, to reconsider her view about the speculation on abduction. Video clip number 2.
So they want to steal her organs or possible trafficking. But considering the state of Nora's body when she was found, would you consider that such speculations are unlikely?
No. In all honesty, I am in no position to speculate really about the motivations behind an abduction. That's not my place to say. I can only comment like any other human, operating in the modern world about why abductions happen. I have no particular opinion on the motivation specifically for Nora. What I would say is that it is possible, reasonable to expect that any plan that could have been conceived at any point might have had to change by virtue of the sheer volume of attention placed on Nora's case, the hundreds of police attached to it, the emphasis that Nora was a child with difficulties that was then being reported in the press. And so I do believe that Nora could have then subsequently been released by captors who would have understood at that point that it was going to be either impossible to move with Nora or that she was a vulnerable child and therefore not necessarily quite what they'd anticipated. So I think that's an important consideration, possibly. I think the other thing that I would say about that is that for me, we were obviously given Nora's post-mortem report. I know the court hasn't heard that evidence yet, but I'm fully aware of the condition in which Nora's body was found. And there were scratchings and markings on Nora's body, of course, but we've asked a lot of people, and at the time I myself considered that none of those markings would be conducive to a child walking continuously in the jungle, barefooted, naked. One of the reasons we've heard from the police repeatedly that they couldn't find Nora, now that we know that the area where she was found was searched repeatedly and by really great experts, was that she was constantly on the move. To be constantly on the move, you need to be able to move quickly. Nora always moved very slowly, I must say, but also quite naturally, you would have a lot of damage to your body because of the terrain. And relatively speaking, in context, she did not. And I am quite shocked by that because, as we've said, it was extremely steep, extremely rocky, extremely difficult to navigate across branches, across dense jungle and so on. You know, why does the state of her body not reflect that of someone who was constantly moving and constantly exposed to the harshest elements? So I think that is an area of concern for me.
So in your opinion, you don't believe that it's possible that Nora got there by herself?
Okay, next.
Brain, or that
Amirul, next slide. Okay, submission of the family. In view of the above and having considered other evidence before this court, it was submitted on behalf of the family that the circumstances around Nora N's death are still unclear. According to learned counsel, there are a number of unanswered questions that remain, and it is impossible to determine with any certainty how her death came about. This is my summary on the submission made on behalf of the family in respect of the unanswered questions. Next. There are many aspects to the case which indicate the involvement of a third party in Nora N's death. There are equal possibilities between the theories of abductions and Nora's own willingness to wander out of the resort when there was no significant witness evidence that could confirm any of the aforesaid, and there were no sighting of Nora N. The evidence of the only potentially significant witness, Muhammad Firdaus bin Kamarudin, SI 29, is not reliable. In view of Nora N's physical capabilities, if she was moving in the jungle, she would do so very slowly. The search area was small and the number of people involved was large, and many of them were highly trained. If Nora N was in the jungle for the entire time that she was missing, it is reasonable to suppose that she would have been found. But it was not the case. The possibility is she was not in that vicinity in the days leading up to her death. A real possibility is that Nora N was not found during the search, as she did not come to that point herself, but was placed by a third party. Next. The suggestion that Nora N left the Sora house through the open window with broken latch has no merit because, according to the learned counsel, first, Nora N's fingerprint were not found in the open window. An obvious explanation is that they were not there because she did not open the window. Second, she would not have been physically able to open the window herself. Nora N's problem with balance and coordination would also have made it very difficult for her to climb out of the window alone. Nora N was not a curious or an adventurous child. She was not confident to explore the world without the safety and security of a familiar adult. Hence, the only possible proposition is that the window was opened by a third party from the outside. The window was closed when the family went to bed and was opened the following morning. There were 4 prints which were incomplete and incapable of comparison. There were 4 further prints which were capable of comparison, but there was no match from the police database or from the witnesses in the case whose fingerprints were taken. This means that the police were not able to use this evidence to identify a suspect. It also means that someone who is unidentified had touched the window from the outside. This clearly leaves open the possibility that the owner of the fingerprints was involved in Nora N's disappearance. The location of the print is in self-suspicious and there is no clear reason why anyone would need to touch the window from the outside. All of these leave open the very real possibility that a third party was involved in Nora N's disappearance. Next. Learned counsel further submitted that the proposition that Nora N may have left the Sora house by way of the front door is not convincing because all of the evidence about her character, combined with all of the evidence about the lock, front gate, the back gate with its fence posts, the difficult terrain, the broken fences, and thick bushy area with a steep slope makes it impossible to imagine that she would have willingly kept moving further. The other side of this proposition is that for an able-bodied person, it would not be difficult for them to enter the Dusun resort. The back gate was insecure. There were gaps in the fencing that for someone able-bodied and wearing shoes would be capable of navigating without difficulty. The Dusun was not well guarded or monitored. There were no relevant findings in respect of forensic evidence from the Sora house. It is submitted that this is not determinative of the issue of whether a third party was involved in Nora N's disappearance. Next. There were marks to Nora N's feet that were consistent with her having been on the move through the jungle at some point. However, the UK pathology Dr. Carey confirmed there is no way to tell whether the marks would be consistent with moving through the jungle for a day, a few days, or a week. Dr. Siu confirmed that although there were marks on Nora N's feet, it was not possible to say over what period of time they were incurred. In this case, the fact that there were no marks is not conclusive of whether a sexual assault may have taken place. There is no evidence of a violent sexual assault. However, all pathologists were consistent in stating that there was no way that they could discount the possibility that Nora N had been the victim of a sexual assault at some time in the days between her going missing and her death. Next. When Nora N went missing, she was wearing underwear. When she was found, she was completely naked. A search was made for her underwear and nothing was found. This further aspect of the case which remains unexplained and which may lend support to the proposition that a sexual assault took place. The chances of recovering significant forensic evidence from Nora N is limited by a number of factors. The first factor is the passage of time. Nora N was missing for 10 days. She was assaulted on day 1. If she was assaulted on day 1, there would be very little possibility of finding DNA evidence of that 10 days later. When Nora N was found, she was unclothed. DNA evidence in the form of saliva, semen, or hair of a third party would quickly be lost in these circumstances. The passage of time alone would mean that through contact with other objects and surfaces, DNA would likely be lost. If it rained or if Nora N came into contact with water, this possibly would be further reduced. Next. In addition, when Nora N's body was found, it was found in a stream. Her hands and feet were submerged in water. The evidence of the pathologist was that they were washerwoman signs on both feet and hands, indicating that her feet and hands had been submerged in water. The witnesses who found Nora N and the photograph of her body also showed that other parts of her body were submerged in the water. Any possibility of finding DNA evidence from saliva, semen, or hair of a third party would be hugely compromised by these circumstances. One possible theory is that Nora N was led away from the Sora house by the intervention of a third party. She could easily have been assaulted in the first few days that she went missing. If she was then released into the jungle, any DNA evidence would be likely to be lost. Nora N's body was left for several days open to the elements and immersed in a stream. It is highly unlikely in such circumstances that DNA evidence would be found under her nails as they were immersed in water. Similarly, it is unlikely that an examination would find any evidence of semen or other bodily fluids, hair or fiber transfer. All of this evidence would be lost as a result of the condition. Next. Since the circumstances around Nora N's death are still unclear because of the above said unanswered question, this court has been invited by learned counsel for the family to return to an open verdict on Nora N's death. Next. That strikes me to two big questions here. First, what does open verdict mean? Second, am I obliged to answer all the unanswered questions raised by the family, failing which I must return to an open verdict? Next. Meaning of open verdict. I don't think it is necessary for me to read my discussion on this in full. Suffice to say that open verdict is not an automatic or direct verdict. This court must see whether firstly there are proof facts. Secondly, the proof facts are enough on the balance of probabilities to satisfy other conclusions. Misadventure or natural death, homicide or suicide. It is only when there is insufficient evidence to bring in any of the other verdicts, then the open verdict must be adverted to. And we can see how this said flow was adopted by Mah Wen Kwai JCA as he then was in the same case of Teo Meng Kee against PP. Next. I now turn to the second issue. Am I obliged to answer all the unanswered questions raised by the family, failing which I must return to an open verdict? The answer is negative. Not all of questions put by the family may be answered. The essential part in the determination of a verdict is the proof fact that justify a specific verdict. I should not to have confused between the two things, namely the filling up of gaps in evidence and the drawing of necessary and proper inferences from fact when proved and ascertained. Next. As Section 337 of the Criminal Procedure Code required, I now revert to the crucial part of this finding. First, who the deceased was. As said, the disease identity as 15 years old Nora and Quoirin is not an issue. Nora and Quoirin was born on 31st May 2004 to Mr. Quoirin and Mrs. Quoirin. She was their first child. She had two younger siblings, Ines Julia and Maurice Orter. Nora N was born with holoprosencephaly, HPE, an abnormality of brain development. There is no dispute too. The question is, how severe was Nora N's condition? My own research on this brain malformation before the inquiry started has shown that the severity of HPE varies widely among the affected individual. The more severe malformation identified, the more problem or complication will be faced by the affected individual. I do not propose to discuss it in detail. It is not my expertise. Suffice us to know what did Nora N's family and her school say about her HPE condition. When explaining what holoprosencephaly is, Mrs. Quoirin had this to say about Nora N. Play video clip number 3.
or that the brain is smaller than normal, than expected, and whereby certain physical issues prevail, such as a central dominant alignment in the body. So, for instance, when Nora was born, she could not breathe well because her nasal passages were too close together. And she had one distinctive feature, which was a single incisor. So instead of having two front teeth, just one, which we, with the help of a dental surgeon, had disguised somewhat for her physical appearance by balancing out the length of her other tooth. But normally that single incisor is longer and wider. So while these facial features are quite subtle, they're nonetheless distinctive. Nora's brain was not fused, but she had a smaller brain. They associated with holoprosencephaly is microcephaly, a particularly small brain, and this was Nora's case.
So, Mrs. Quoirin, can I just ask, at the time that Nora went missing, she was 15 years of age?
Correct.
Her manifest condition at the age of 15 years, i.e. the age when, her manifest condition at the age of 15 years, i.e. the age when she went missing, was further explained as follow. Video clip number 4.
Particularly small brain, and this was Nora's case.
So, Mrs. Quoirin, can I just ask, at the time that Nora went missing, she was 15 years of age?
Correct.
How did her condition manifest itself at that time? So first, perhaps if you can deal with it from a physical perspective, what physical problems did it cause Nora?
Nora had quite a lot of physical challenges in both her fine motor and gross motor skills. So she was physically well and able from a basic point of view, but Nora struggled a great deal with her balance and coordination in particular. So she would have to, for instance, if she would try to run or move quickly, she would have a lot of difficulty with that, or had a very awkward gait. She would often fall or stumble if she was walking in areas that were not flat or straight. She would not be able, for instance, to swim easily or manage any activity that required any sort of balance. So she could climb a little bit at a play park, but she wouldn't be able to manage any serious climbing or handle any sort of even quite basic physical obstacle course like you would see in children's playgrounds. That was beyond her ability. I would say a major feature for Nora physically were her hands. So when Nora was little, it was explained to me this way, and she had this throughout her life and had occupational therapy at times to try and help this. But it was like having to wear thick rubber gloves all the time. So she struggled to grip anything, hold anything with any degree of force. Her hands were often situated at a funny and unusual angle. So like this or like this, she would often bend her hand backwards, and they would hang strangely by her side. She struggled to maintain a position sensibly. So, for instance, that meant that writing was a real challenge. Nora really couldn't write. Her handwriting, for instance, was like a very small child, and she couldn't write more than a very basic sentence. That was a cognitive issue, but also a physical issue. She couldn't manage zips or buttons, particularly buttons, with any ease. She couldn't manage any activity, for instance, where she'd have to move her hands behind her back. She couldn't twist an object or try to open anything with any force. She couldn't manage a phone. She couldn't hold a phone closely to her ear. We communicated using phones with video because it was too hard for Nora to coordinate hand to mouth activity. Another physical issue was her, what we call core strength. So Nora would tire very easily whilst simply sitting. And for instance, a school day for Nora was physically very tiring. And again, the specialists told us that, just to stay sitting up like you and I are now would demand quite a lot of effort for Nora. So regularly, I would take her to osteopathy to help her tiredness levels. And we had understood that from a physical point of view, her nervous system was frequently strained by just average activity. And on top of that, then she also suffered from enuresis, so nighttime bedwetting. And this was not constant, but it was regular. And the week before we went to Malaysia, she in fact had a lot of enuresis challenges to deal with. Also, she had some hearing difficulty. This was quite mild. So Nora could hear relatively well, but not in a situation where there were many people.
So Nora Ann's former head teacher at Garrett Park School, Michael Reeve, Mr. Reeve, as I will refer afterwards, had also contributed a lot to this inquiry as far as Nora Ann's condition is concerned. He who joined the school in 2006 was acquainted with the disease. He spoke to her frequently. He observed her behavior frequently. He had also stood in as a substitute teacher for Nora Ann's class several times. This is what he said about Nora Ann's condition in relation to HPE. Video clip 5. And then video clip 6. Sambung terus.
Do you know her personally, being a student at that school?
Yes, I know all of my students well, and I speak to many of them every day. I certainly saw Nora every day for 4 years. And occasionally I taught her.
Do you know Nora's condition?
Yes.
Could you tell the court what you understand by Nora's condition?
Right. The main diagnosis was a condition called microform holoprosencephaly, and that means that the two frontal lobes of the brain had not separated fully. Now, there are different forms of this. Nora had the microform of the condition. The moderate and severe forms of this condition inevitably result in death, either before birth or shortly afterwards. Nora's form might be described as mild, but it did nevertheless result in significant learning difficulties and physical disability. The only reason we would call it mild is that Nora did not die from it when she was small. In terms of the effects that this had upon her functioning, in terms of her intellect and cognition and learning, Nora presented when she arrived with us at the age of 11 as a child functioning in terms of reading at about the age of 6. At the age of 11.
Next, video clip 6.
And in relation to the point at which and in relation to the point at which she started, she made good progress with us and she worked very hard. Other conditions included particularly very poor balance, very poor core strength, poor posture, and all of that meant that physically she found it difficult to take part in some activities, including PE. In the 4 years that I knew Nora, I didn't once see her running in the playground. She was unable to run. She was able to run, but she was fearful of falling, and she did sometimes fall when she tried to run. So she did have a significant physical disability as well, although you may not have seen it. Her ability to move, her ability to balance, her ability to have a straight posture was limited. She also had a significant speech and language delay. As I've said, her sentence formation skills and her recall of sentences she'd heard were again typical of a child much younger than she was. She had a hearing loss in her right ear, which was managed.
Okay, next slide. So the above explanations on Nora N and the HPE is even clearer when this court was referred to Exhibit EI62. Okay, Exhibit EI62 is the London Borough of Lambeth Education, Health and Care Assessment Report on Nora N with a remark final April 2018. All background information about Nora N is provided at page 2 to 6 of the said report. The relevant excerpt of the report is produced as in the slide. Okay, next. So Nora N suffered from microfoam holoprosencephaly, a mild type of HPE. Having regard to the above, it is obviously clear that Nora N was not an average child. Neither she was a child with the most severe form of HPE. She was a child who had a mild form of disorder known as microfoam holoprosencephaly. Although it was a mild form of brain disorder, it was manifested with, as the record shows, the following symptoms and condition: microcephaly, coronal stenosis, single central incisor, moderate learning difficulties, nocturnal enuresis, bedwetting, moderate hearing loss in her right ear, speech and language delay, and delays in fine and gross motor coordination development. Next. Now, this is Nora N on the 3rd of August 2019 at KLIA. Please play video clip number 9, 10, and 11. Sebelum tu apa ni? Stop sekejap. Stop sekejap. Okay. Stop. I need to continue something. Okay, in view of Nora N condition, okay, with the symptoms and the condition that I said before, Nora N attended Garrett Park School in September 2015. She was with the school until July 2019. She was originally attended Saint Bernadette's Catholic School. These facts I found in Wandsworth Hearing Support Service report dated 14th of March 2016, a supporting document to the annual review report dated 16 March 2016, Exhibit EI61. Garrett Park School is a state special school caters solely for children aged from 11 to 19 years with special educational needs and disabilities. Its curriculum is different from the one in a mainstream school. According to Mr. Reeve, SI 37, when she arrived at the school at the age of 11 in September 2015, Nora N presented as a child functioning in terms of reading at age of 6 and 5 months. She had a math age of 4 years and 10 months, and she had an expressive language age of 5. Apart from the above, Mr. Reeve also described Nora N as a child with poor balance, poor posture, and difficult to take part in some activities. I did confirm with the witness if the above said as conditioned he referred to was the one prevailed in September 2015. Based on the initial assessment on Nora N, a learning plan was designed by the school for her. She took part in the standard school curriculum. In addition to it, she attended occupational therapy, OT, and speech and language therapy, SLT, to develop the relevant skill needed. This is what was said by Mr. Reeve. Video clip number 8. Lapan. I skip yang 7.
Programs that you suggested to the parent for Nora to undertake.
The programs in school?
Yes. The
Right.
first time when he came to school. Upon your testimony. Okay.
Yeah, we are a school which caters solely for children with special educational needs and disabilities, and therefore our curriculum is very different from the curriculum you would find in a mainstream school. Most of our subject content is primary school based. We have the same subjects as a mainstream school has, but at a much lower level. We also put in place occupational therapy on a one-to-one basis to develop Nora's fine motor skills, especially with writing, her posture and her balance. We put in speech and language therapy in order to develop her receptive and expressive language, her vocabulary, her ability to answer questions beginning with who, what, where, and why, and how.
So as young children with special educational need and disability, all students in Garrett Park School, school achievement and their progress will be reviewed annually in compliance with the respective local authorities' statutory requirement. The annual review, as Mr. Reeve explained, is each academic year, and the school academic year runs from September to July. Each student shall have his or her own annual review report, and Nora N was also be part of the said review process. It is interesting to note that the review process involved not only the teachers and the students, but also the parents and all professional specialists who directly involved with the students. All the detailed statements and views on the pupil progress are well stated and documented. As for Nora N, the annual review report are presented by Exhibit EI61, EI65, EI62, and EI60. They are of much assistance to this court in understanding Nora N's condition. According to Mr. Reeve, based on the above, the progress made by Nora N was rather small in all areas for each year. Exactly, that was what he looked at as a school teacher. For me, Garrett Park School had done great job for Nora N in terms of her social skill, learning skill, speech and language skill, and even her fine and gross motor skill. She was able to participate in several activities such as swimming, basketball, and bike club. By saying that, it does not mean that we are looking at Nora as an average child, a normal person, never. The fact that she was a student with a diagnosis of microform holoprosencephaly, benign type of HPE remains. We have no issue on that. This court still recognizes the limitation that came with Nora N's condition. The important point here is the effort made on Nora N, the effort that Mr. and Mrs. Quoirin, the school, teachers, therapists, and other specialists and professionals put on Nora N were remarkable. They had been trying to treat her developmental delay and intellectual disability at a maximum possible improvement. For that, I would like to reproduce what Mr. Reeve testified before this court. I said with our student in general, we don't expect our student at Garrett Park School to be fake, to be cured. What we aim to do is to get the best out of them that we possibly can in their circumstances. We will not be expecting Nora when she left Garrett Park School to have good balance or core strength or good posture. We were simply aiming for that, firstly, not to get any worse than it was, and for the gap between her and normal development to be as small as possible. We are special school, and we would not directly in the course of an annual review meeting or in any annual review report compare our student to average student. All of our progress based on other children of similar difficulties, and whenever we refer to progress, we would say, yes, the child is making progress. We might say the child is making better than expected progress, but that would be better than expected in her context. It would not be better than expected in comparison to other students in terms of her never saying she's made poor progress. And the result could be seen from the report itself, especially the views made by Nora N's parents on her progress. Though the progress shown by Nora N was still slow and she was not yet autonomous, as described by Mrs. Quoirin, her mild HPE condition did not deprive her from inter alia studying, participating in social activities, joining school trip, though with close supervision, playing games, walking in the park, and even going holiday with the family to other countries, which was inclusive of long-hour flight to Malaysia on the 2nd of August 2019. Mr. Quoirin said flying by plane was not a novelty at all for Nora N. He said, as a family, we love walking on the weekend. We live near an urban environment. We live near at parks, so we often go, an hour's walk in the park together. And I thought a walk in nature, it would be a nice thing for us to do. Next. Okay, now it's the proper video clip. This is Nora N on the 3rd of August 2019 at Kuala Lumpur International Airport. Video clip 9, 10, 11. Then 11. Okay, stop. Next slide. Next. Okay. About the trip to Malaysia on the 2nd of August 2019, Mr. Quoirin testified that the journey in all was about 19 hours. He and the children flew from London Heathrow to Abu Dhabi and then from Abu Dhabi to KLIA. Nora N was accustomed to a plane. She was capable to go to the toilet by herself. She was toilet independent. So too when she was at home. Though she and other siblings were not very well rested and had sleeping problem in the flight, Nora N had no enuresis challenges on the plane compared to the week before the family went to Malaysia, where she had a lot of enuresis challenges to deal with. She had wet the bed a few times that week. Next. Mr. Quoirin and his 3 children arrived at KLIA on the 3rd of August 2019 at 10 o'clock in the morning, where they then met up with Mrs. Quoirin, who was flying from Singapore. Then a driver, a local Malaysian man arranged by the Dusun, picked the family up from KLIA to the Dusun. The journey took them less than an hour and perhaps 45 minutes. Nora Ann stayed awake on the road. She was very excited. Nora was very affectionate, so she was holding on to me. And she wanted to tell me about her week where I had been absent. And she was telling me about story from school. And she was telling me about the movies that they had watched on the airplane. Mrs. Quoirin statement. Next. The Quoirin family arrived at the resort in the afternoon. The day was hot. There, they were entertained by Nur Asma binti Lokman, SI 39, manager of the resort, who then brought them to their accommodation at Sora House and open air concert. Next. These are some photos of the Sora House taken by the police. Next. Next. Okay, next. On arrival, as said, the weather was hot. The Quoirin family began their day at the Dusun with swimming to cool off. Mrs. Quoirin had this to explain her family's activities as soon as they arrived at the Dusun Sora house until 10 p.m. on the 3rd of August 2019. Please play video clip number 12. Please listen carefully.
Also read on this website.
That there were some basic trails within the resort itself. So we thought we would just stay in the resort, stretch our legs, stay doing some quiet activities. So after we first settled in, we went to the pool to cool down. We were a bit hot and uncomfortable after the journey. And we had a short swim in the pool next to the Sora house. So the top pool, as I call it. Then we had some lunch. We had pre-booked lunch and dinner for the first day with the resort. So we had some lunch. Everyone needed a rest after that. So we had a short siesta. The children rested in the mezzanine where they were to sleep. I rested on the sofa. My husband rested on the bed downstairs. We were all together and just, I don't know, probably for 30 minutes slept, spent an hour just resting in bed. And then we decided we would go for a walk. And we wanted to just explore the trails within the resort. So we did that. And it was a bit tricky. We quite quickly, when you go on to one of the trails, the path becomes less flat. It's not very difficult, but it's at an angle. And there are tree roots and things. And within just a few moments, Nora fell, and she hurt herself quite badly, actually. She was in pain. She fell on her right hip and she sustained a very large bruise from that, and she was a bit upset. After that, once she'd settled herself, I held her hand for the remainder of the walk. And we didn't go far. We walked for about 30 minutes around the resort, very slowly, because we were quite surprised at how tricky it was, even though we were following designated trails. So we wanted to see, there was a deer park, and we wanted to, the children love seeing animals. All children usually like that. So we wanted to see the deer. They weren't there, we couldn't see them, but we went past the deer park. We basically did a small loop around the resort, within the resort. And after that, Nora was quite fed up, actually. She really didn't want to do anything else. But the other children wanted to go for another swim. So we decided we would go to the second pool, the bottom pool, which was bigger. We were the only people at the pool, apart from Helen, the owner of the resort, who we met for the first time, who was there with her grandchildren. And they were just finishing their swim. So quite quickly we had the pool to ourselves. And that was nice for myself and the children. Nora was quite tired at this point and didn't really want to stay in the water. So I was just helping her. I was pulling her along, like with my hands in the water, just to help her relax. And so Nora and I probably spent about 20 minutes in the pool at the most. And then the other children decided to stay with my husband, and I took Nora back up to the chalet because she'd had enough. She didn't want to do any more. Nora and I noticed that there was a little reflexology circle beside the Sora house, and I love reflexology, so I was walking around for a little bit on that, and it was quite painful to the feet, and Nora was laughing at that, and she didn't want to try it, of course, but she was watching me, and so we spent a short period of time there. Then we went inside, and Nora and I showered, and I took a while because Nora's hair was a bit tangled, so spent quite a bit of time just getting Nora organized for the evening, really. The others came back, they got their showers, and then we had ordered a barbecue for the evening, and so Sebastian was looking after that and getting it ready, and I was playing basic games, little basic card games with the children on the balcony. Again, I was very aware. I remember being so very aware of Nora's tiredness level. She just kept saying she didn't really want to join in, but Nora was always on my team. We were always the team, so she was happy to let me play on her behalf, and she sat by my side. We probably spent maybe up to an hour doing that, and then we ate a meal together, and we talked just about how excited we were to be on holiday, but we hadn't at this stage, we hadn't told the children anything about the rest of the trip, and we didn't talk about what we were going to do, just we were just chatting. And then they were so exhausted, they decided they wanted to go to bed immediately. And I was quite relieved because Sebastian and I also wanted to go to bed immediately. So I brought them up to the mezzanine. They said goodnight to their dad. I remember trying to persuade all three of them to put on pajamas. And it was incredibly hot that first night, and they all refused completely to wear any clothing, so they all slept in just their underwear, which is unusual. Normally they wore pajamas, but it was so hot they weren't used to the heat, so they all just had underwear on. And then, as normal, I tucked them up individually, one at a time, in bed, kissed and cuddled them all, and turned out the light and went back downstairs. And I think they fell asleep within seconds of that. There was not a single noise from the children from that point onwards. I think they closed their eyes and went straight to sleep.
And what?
Okay, at downstairs, Mrs. Quoirin noticed a casement window with a missing broken latch in the living area. At this material time, Mr. Quoirin had already gone into the master bedroom to sleep. Mrs. Quoirin pulled the respective window in to close it as close as she could, and then she joined Mr. Quoirin to sleep. And I thought I should close them just as, standard reflect, I suppose, for closing up for the night. And I, at that point, noticed that I could not. There was no latch on the window, so I cannot close it easily. And I had to use my fingernails to grab onto the ledge of the outer casing of the window to pull each window shut, Mrs. Quoirin said. It was Mrs. Quoirin who switched off all the lights and shut the wooden sliding door. They all slept with the lights off. Next. The next day, on the 4th of August 2019, Mrs. Quoirin woke up at 7 a.m. At about 8 a.m., he went to the mezzanine or loft to wake up the children, but noticed that Nora Ann was not in her bed. He alarmed his wife on the missing Nora Ann, and both started searching for her outside the Sora house. They were later joined by the staff of the resort and some other tourists, but yielded no result still. Mrs. Quoirin only noticed that the window with broken latch was open when she got back to the Sora house. I knew that looking at the window, someone had opened that window. I knew it wasn't us, and I also knew that it was physically and cognitively absolutely impossible that Nora would even notice the window, let alone climb out it. So I was immediately panicked by the window, Mrs. Quoirin said. Then show the windows. Okay, this is the respective window. Next. Now, the police report was only made at about 11 a.m., 11 and 8 a.m., and it was done by Hanim Binti Ahmad. In the meantime, the family was still searching for Nora Ann within the perimeter of the resort. Mr. Quoirin also ventured outside the resort through the back gate. After about 2 hours, Mrs. Quoirin requested to be driven to the police station. As said, Nora Ann's disappearance had sparked an extensive search thereafter involving various agencies and hundreds of people. Sniffer dogs and drones had also been deployed in the said operation. This court was shown with Exhibit EI-14, consists of several maps containing information on the searches for Nora Ann. This court was also explained in great details about the searches, the difficulties, the surrounding dense jungle, the hilly terrains, and the challenges. Finally, on 30th of August 2019, the 15-year-old Nora Ann's body was found by a group of hikers near water stream in a palm oil plantation. It was about 10 days after she went missing. Kindly refer to Exhibit EI-76, page 8 of the autopsy report on Nora Ann, which confirmed the body belonged to Nora Ann Quoirin. Now the question begins. Next. When did Nora Ann die? I think it is necessary to highlight here that we are not dealing with a medically attended death. It is about an unwitnessed death in an abandoned palm oil plantation where the only possible way to know when did she die is by estimating it. Based on the explanation given by Dr. Siu and Dr. Hanif, I am satisfied to adopt their finding that the estimated time of death based on the postmortem changes is about 2 to 3 days, but less than 4 days prior to the postmortem examination. Next. Where did the deceased die? It is clear from testimony of the witnesses that Nora Ann's body was found in the palm oil plantation in Pantai Hill, Negeri Sembilan. There was no dispute to these facts. Next. How and after what manner Nora Ann came by her death? The apparent cause of death is, as I said, upper gastrointestinal bleeding due to duodenal ulcer complicated with perforation. Dr. Siu, Dr. Hanif, and Dr. Carey all agreed that the said cause of death had developed because of starvation and tremendous stress. And just want to know why ulcer was so bad in this girl. I mean, if normally we expect 1 or 2, but this is a lot. You see the postmortem photos, there one of ulcer, this is very unusual for us to see, in the normal postmortem. We expect one perforation common, but this is a lot. I think the postmortem photo have a group of the one we taken the whole sample that is not usual. So there must be something more than the normal, stress. This is tremendous stress, said Dr. Siu. Next. However, the cause of death under Section 328 of the Criminal Procedure Code does not include the apparent cause of death as ascertainable by inspections of or postmortem examination of the body of the deceased. It also includes all matters necessary to enable an opinion to be formed as to the manner in which the deceased came by his death, and as to whether his death resulted in any way from or was accelerated by any unlawful act or omission on the part of the other person. This will go back to the parameters of the inquiry enunciated by Section 327 of the same code, as I discussed in the earlier paragraph. Next. This is where the open verdict suggested by the family derived from. Returning to the statutory mandate given to me, the question left for my consideration, which required some intense scrutiny, is to find out the cause of Nora's death in such condition and circumstances and decide inter alia whether it can be categorized as natural death or suicide or homicide or open verdict. As I said, the open verdict must be adverted to only where there is insufficient evidence to bring in any of the other verdicts. Next. First, whether Nora died by natural death. This verdict can be ruled out in the absence of proof facts to such effect. Next. Next, suicide. Secondly, whether she died by suicide. The verdict can be completely ruled out in the absence of evidence or proof facts. Next. The next question is whether available evidence allows that Nora N died as a result of homicide. Generally, homicide is killing by whatever means of one human being by another. Here, based on the theory put by the family, we might be dealing with a crime which is not premeditated. Amongst the suggestions put by Mrs. Quoirin are these. She was abducted by someone who perhaps had not intended to abduct child. Nora N might get outside and she was encountered by someone by chance who then decided to take her away. She could have been also inside and standing on the balcony and the person could have encountered her there. B. Nora N was abducted for spiritual or cultural practices because she was a vulnerable child who would be an in particularly even more attractive person to abduct. C. So because of the attention placed on Nora N's case and they just came to know that she was a vulnerable child, the perpetrator had decided to release her in the jungle, which then led to her death. It was also submitted on behalf of the family that the fact Nora N's underwear was not found and its whereabouts was unexplained. This may lend support to the proposition that a sexual assault took place before she was left in the jungle. With due respect, I find the above said conclusion suggestions put by on behalf of the family are nothing more than probable theory. As I said earlier in this inquiry, it is not probability that determines verdicts but proof facts. Having considered all of the above, I will also rule out the verdicts of homicide for the following reason. A. There is no evidence on any suspicious circumstances which can lead to homicide prior to the arrival of the family to Malaysia. Even Nora N went to the plain toilet by herself. According to Mrs. Quoirin, there was nothing suspicious. B. There is also no evidence on any suspicious circumstances when the family arrived at the KLIA. There was a moment when Nora N and her sibling were left by their father at the arrival hall and they were approached by a man who was then talking to Ines. The police had obtained the CCTV footage from KLIA on that incident as shown in clip video number 4. Clip video 13. Boleh cepatkan Okay. Done. So upon investigation, it was confirmed by SP Chong Mei Chai, SI4, that the man and his lady partner were free from any criminal element. C. The investigation conducted, which include photo documentation of the scene, the body, the interview with the family and other persons who were relevant to the incident, search the scene for fingerprints, DNA and trace evidence, examination on the body at the scene for the presence of any trace evidence, forensic autopsy, toxicological analysis, however, developed no lead to any theory of homicide. There was no ransom request. E. The email sent to a Lucy Blackman Trust, a charity and support group for Nora N via an email account was found to be a scam. The email was sent on the same date a reward was offered by the family for information leading to the return of Nora N. Please see Exhibit EI 54 and EI 55. F, the DNA and physical evidence show that Nora N was not the victim of sexual offences. And G, there was no sign of intruder who entered the dusun or the Sora house, entered the dusun or the Sora house. So it is essential to emphasize here again and again, in view of the issues raised by the family with regard the unanswered questions, that this inquiry is not to be regarded as litigation. It is not. It is not criminal proceeding, neither it is civil proceeding. It is merely a fact-finding exercise. It is not simply filling up of gaps in evidence, especially in this case, the incident took place in a resort surrounded by dense jungle, so to the location where Nora N was found. As I said earlier, in this inquiry, it is not probability that determines verdict, but proof facts. The proof facts showed that there was no element of homicide, whether it is intentional or unintentional. Next. Finally, it's about the verdict of misadventure. I must remind myself that if the evidence or proof fact is not available and the verdict of misadventure is not possible, I must return to an open verdict. The question now is whether Nora N died by misadventure. For that purpose, I have drawn a diagram showing the sequence of some events that I think could help me in the determination of the above said question. Next. Tak tahu nampak ke tak? Okay, so we see from the 2nd August, Mrs. and the Mr. Quoirin and the 3 children left from London to Malaysia at about 6 to 7 a.m. Nora and her sibling were not very well rested and had sleeping problem in the flight. Mr. Quoirin did not sleep at all. No suspicious person, neither circumstances on the plane. Nora Ann could go to the toilet by herself. Nora Ann suffered from nighttime bedwetting. It was not constant, but it was regular. And the week before the travel to Malaysia, she had in fact a lot of aneurysm challenges to deal with, but not on that particular flight. So they arrived, Nora Ann and her sibling were not very well. So they arrived at Kuala Lumpur, KLIA on the 3rd of August at 10 a.m. It's about 19 hours from London to Abu Dhabi and Abu Dhabi to Malaysia. Okay, next. Now, when actually this is the summary of what I have told before, that what my concern is that after 19 hours of journey from London to Abu Dhabi to Malaysia, so the journey continued with another 45 minutes. Okay, it's about 45 minutes from KLIA to the Dusun. So in this case, on the 3rd of August 2019 afternoon around 1 a.m., the Quoirin family arrived at the Dusun. The weather was hot. This is important point. Hanim owner of the Dusun met Maurice, Nora Ann's younger brother. The Quoirin family was entertained by Asma and escorted to the Sora house. And Mr. Quoirin asked Asma about the 6-hour jungle trekking where all the family would join, and no suspicious circumstances were told to the court. And all family members walked normal and observed by Asma, who at the time did not know which one was Nora Ann. And the description of the path leading to the Sora house was explained by Hanim in this word. Dari parking ada satu jalan cerun ke atas jalan, ada satu akar pokok rain tree yang besar. Nak kena langkah kat situ ada tangga, lepas tu ada reception. Di situ ada tangga turun ke patio, di tempat kami makan. Selepas itu masuk ke sebelah kiri iaitu sebelah pool, dan terus ke depan itu sebelah playground rumah Sora. Kesemua tempat kawasan kami memang kalau orang yang sakit lutut atau susah nak berjalan memang susah. 19 hours, 45 minutes, arrive at Sora house, and they have to experience that particular path towards the Sora house. And afternoon, as we heard the explanation of the activities undertaken by the Quoirin family, swimming, lunch, napping, dusun walk, and again, no suspicious circumstances were told to the court. And evening, 3rd of August 2019, they have showered, playing card, barbecue, and also no suspicious circumstances were informed to the court. And according, at this particular juncture, what I would like to stress or emphasize is that the family all jet lagged and tired for a long journey and had a little bit less energy. As the day progressed, Nora and also had shown her level of tiredness increase. Next. Okay, according to Mrs. Quoirin, this is the only bathroom used by the family. And the bathroom is in the master bedroom. And the one below that bathroom is is the spare bathroom, if I may call, where none of the family used the spare toilet because before the spiral staircase on the right, because according to Mrs. Quoirin, it smelled bad. Next. So until 10 a.m., 10 p.m., Mrs. Quoirin put Nora and other children to sleep upstairs in the mezzanine. According to Mrs. Quoirin, Nora Ann had no difficulty to climb that spiral staircase to the mezzanine. So again, at this moment, the important point here is the weather was very hot. And Professor Datuk Dr. Gurdia Singh Nijal had asked this particular question. The spiral staircase, if you come down this way, Nora had no difficulty unassisted to climb that staircase. She didn't have to be carried up. Am I right? So this is the answer by Mrs. Quoirin. No. She could climb up and down stairs like everyone. She would have used the pond rail to get up and down the staircase. She could do that herself. So the children refused to wear any clothing. They all slept in just their underwear because it was so hot. Nora slept on the double mattress with Ines, and no suspicious circumstances were informed to the court. Okay, so according to Mrs. Quoirin, the weather was incredibly hot. And she said that the children were not used to that heat. Next. So on 10 at 10 onward, 10 p.m. onward, as I said, Mrs. Quoirin settled with the children and realized after that she realized that there is a broken latch at one window, and they all slept with the lights. So the point here is for us to remember when she shut all the windows, the front door, okay, and the sliding wooden door. Please remember the open concept of the Sora house. Its location in the forest. There are no doors, window, or even blinds separating the living room from the balcony and the grounds beyond. According to Ines, that was the first jungle experience for her and the sibling. Next. So on the 3rd of August 2000, midnight or after midnight, okay, Mrs. Quoirin said that he woke up after 3 to 4 hours heavy sleep because of the outside noises which came from the chalet where they seemed to be having a party. Later in the night, Mr. Quoirin did hear some muffled noise but was unable to describe it because he was in a state of semi-conscious and asleep. The sound was close. Mrs. Quoirin heard voices from people who were essentially on their way back to their chalet. Mrs. Quoirin also heard muffled sound in the house, but she was not fully awake. This is what was said by Mrs. Quoirin. These sounds were, I'm sorry if I said muffled before, I don't remember. I don't think I would describe those as muffled, not in the same way. The sound I heard inside were really quiet and discreet. The sound outside were clearly people's voice talking at a normal pitch. Next. The 4th of August. Okay. Mrs. Quoirin woke up, and at 8, Mrs. Quoirin went to see to wake the children up, and he found out that Nora was not in the bed, and Mr. and Mrs. Quoirin were asking Ines about Nora Ann's missing, and they were informed that she had gone down to the toilet. I mean, I refer to Ines. Ines had gone down to the toilet earlier and noticed that Nora was not in her bed, but did not think it would be worth pointing this out to us because Nora was probably just in our room with us. So it was about 8 hours from midnight if the family wanted to relate the missing of Nora Ann to the muffled sound in the Sora house. And eventually around 7:30, this is what Mrs. Quoirin said. And eventually around 7:30, I was aware that Sebastian was awake also, and we had started to talking the fact that we should go and wake Nora because we were worried about her waiting on bed. And was that point went to the and that point he was then go to the mezzanine and discover that she was missing. She gone to the bathroom that stage, and when she go back, she realized Nora was not in their bed. And I asked her why she didn't come and tell us, and she said she thought Nora was probably just in our room. That's about the statement given Mrs. Quoirin about what Ines said to her. So now, on 4th August 2019 until 4th August 2019 after 8 a.m. and 4th of August 2019 as at 11:08 a.m. Okay, it was about 11 hours from midnight if the family wanted to relate the missing of Nora and to the muffled sound in the Sora house. So, at this moment, the question that comes to my mind is whether the front door was locked or unlocked. Okay, then I got the answer from Hanim. Ibu saya menelefon saya jam 9 pagi. Ibu saya Helen, dan dia berkata ada seorang budak kurang upaya yang hilang dari rumah Sora. Dia berkata Nora dan adik perempuannya tidur di bilik tingkat atas di tilam yang sama. Bila adik dia bangun sekitar 7 pagi, dia dapati Nora tak ada. Tapi dia ingat Nora dengan ibu bapa dia di bawah. Dari bilik Nora tidur sampai ke tingkat bawah, dia kena turun melalui tangga spiral. Jadi keluarga Nora hanya sedar Nora hilang pada sekitar 8:30 pagi. So selepas dapat telefon dari mak saya terus siap dan turun ke Pesio. Saya nampak cik jemput pekerja kami ada di situ seorang dari diri sebab semua orang dah bersurai untuk cari Nora. So saya pergi ke parking lot dan saya nampak Norizan. Dia kata dia tak jumpa Nora. Saya berjumpa beberapa orang lain lagi dan mereka semua tak jumpa Nora. Jadi saya fikir lagi baik buat laporan next. Polis secepat mungkin sebab kita tak tahu bila exactly dia keluar rumah. So saya ke rumah Sora, ibu bapa Nora di situ dengan 2 orang anak mereka. Saya bertanya kepada ibu, kalau dia nak ke balai polis bersama saya, ibu dia kata dia tak nak tinggalkan kedua orang anaknya sendirian. Kemudian saya bertanya kepada bapa Nora kalau dia nak datang ke balai polis untuk membuat laporan. Dia kata tidak. Jadi saya seorang diri pergi ke balai polis. Sebelum itu Ibu Nora ada beritahu saya bahawa Nora berumur 15 tahun tapi tahap mental dia seperti anak 4 atau 5 tahun. Ibu Nora kata Nora tak pakai baju selain daripada seluar dalam. Kasut dan selipar pun tak pakai. Ibu Nora kata tingkap yang ditarik itu untuk malam sebelum itu dapati dalam keadaan terbuka. Jadi dia dah tutup. Jadi pagi dah terbuka. Ibu Nora kata pintu bilik tidur ibu bapa di master bedroom tutup malam tadi. Saya tanya kalau pintu depan rumah berkunci. Ibu Nora kata malam tadi dia kunci pintu tu. Tapi pagi tadi dia tak perasan kalau pintu tu tak berkunci. Sebab masa tu bila dia buka pintu tu dia tengah cemas. Jadi dia tak perasan sebab pintu tu kita lock dari dalam, bila buka pusing lepas tu bunyi clack, dia dah terbuka. So next. Okay, that's the answer I obtained from Hanim. So on 4th of August 2019, which is at 11:20 AM, Inspector 1 Farida came. Okay, Inspector 1 Farida as investigating officer had directed Sergeant Norzi to go to the resort for initial investigation after the report lodged by Hanim. Okay, and Sergeant Norzi and 2 other policemen went to the resort and searched for Nora N within the resort but to no avail. So on at 11:30 AM, Inspector Farida and Sergeant Rahman arrived at the resort. Inspector Farida interviewed Hanim as the complainant of the missing report. Next. The investigation began with Inspector Farida recording Mr. and Mrs. Quoirin's statements. She then directed Sergeant Rahman to dust and leave fingerprints, if any, on the window with broken latch and on the front door knob. 8 fingerprints lifted from the said window by Sergeant Rahman. Of the 4, only 1 match to the sample obtained, i.e. Mrs. Quoirin. This is what Inspector Farida said. Hasil dusting yang dilakukan oleh Sarjan Rahmat berjaya menimbulkan sejumlah 8 kesan cap jari pada bingkai luar tingkap yang terbuka. Pencarian cap jari pada tombol pintu tidak dapat dilakukan kerana permukaan licin dan telah disentuh oleh orang ramai. So on the same date at 2 p.m, search operation began until the body of Nora N was found on 13th of August 2019. Criminal investigation also continued and never stopped. However, no criminal element were found. So based on that diagram, I can have a sufficient proof fact. And the existence of the above said proof facts for me is sufficient on the balance of probabilities to lead to the inference that Nora N had gone out of the Sora house on her own and subsequently got lost in the abandoned palm oil plantation. And these are my reasons. First, this court acknowledged, as I say in the earlier paragraph, the position of Nora N as a child with a mild HPE. But this court also recognizes her capabilities within her limitation. B, making 19 hours journey by plane from London to KLIA, which has a great time different in age, plus another 45 minutes from KLIA to the Dusun would sometime give to tiredness and confusion. C, in this case, as the day progressed, Nora N had shown her level of tiredness increase. if Mr. Quoirin could wake up after 3 to 4 hours heavy sleep because of the outside noises which came from the chalet where they seemed to be having a party, there was high probability that Nora N would face the same distraction. Mr. Reeve at one point had this to say: in terms of her communication and interaction, she was very easily distracted by noise, particularly. One of the difficulties that many of our children have is their difficulty with sensory processing. So anything that interrupts or disturbs what they are listening to, they find very difficult to handle. Or she might wake up for other reason. For example, because of the heat that she was not used to, as Mrs. Quoirin said, or due to jet lag symptom. She woke up and tried to find her parents. Looking for both was not unusual as testified by Mrs. Quoirin. That's why Ines could have the same presumption when she found that her sister was not in bed. As said, Nora N had no problem in navigating the spiral staircase. Suddenly waking up in the middle of the night with light off and in a strange place, then walking down the staircase searching for the parent who was sleeping in the master bedroom with the sliding door shut. One might expect the difficulty she faced in the strange and new place. The sliding door is a very heavy, thick door actually. I remember being struck by that because I closed that door on the first evening to block out the street lamp that was bothering me. And obviously, yes, that quite a noise and like broker, Mrs. Quoirin's statement. Nora N might accidentally push the window with a broken latch out while looking for the right track to her parents. See the location of the window and the staircase in this photo. Next. Okay, please concentrate on this photo. See the starter steps which facing the window. I agreed that Nora N's fingerprint could not be identified on the window. One of the possibilities is that her fingerprint was contaminated. However, the fact shows that it had been difficult to get Nora N's fingerprint even with the assistance of Interpol. Her fingerprint sample was inadequate, and even after she was found, the fingerprint had shriveled. The only door that she might be able to open, believing that the parents were there, was the entrance door. Mr. Quoirin believed that Nora N was capable of opening the said door. She was totally independent. She just need to twist the doorknob to open the said window, to open the said door. Mrs. Quoirin was not sure when asked by Hanim if the front door was still locked in the morning. Saya tanya kalau pintu depan rumah berkunci. Ibu Nora kata malam tadi dia kunci pintu tu, tapi pagi tadi dia tak perasan kalau pintu tu tak berkunci sebab masa tu bila dia buka pintu dia tengah cemas. Jadi dia tak perasan sebab pintu itu kita lock dari dalam. Bila buka pusing lepas tu bunyi clack, dia dah terbuka. Nora N was barefoot and wearing only her underwear when she disappeared. That was the last clothes she was seen wearing by her mother. Now, how she could be there, i.e. the location she was finally found. Next. As I said, every inquiry or inquest is different. This inquiry is with regards to the missing person in a resort surrounded by dense forest. See the green area in the following map in support of the aforesaid. Next. Even the resort itself tried their level best to preserve the nature as best as possible. See also the following photo on the back view of the Sora house. Next. Next. Okay. There are places to hide. Okay. So the missing of Nora N was followed by a massive search and rescue operation plus criminal investigation altogether. As illustrated by the above stated diagram, it was about 8 hours from the midnight if the family wanted to relate the missing of their daughter to the muffled sound in the Sora house to the time when Mr. Quoirin discovered that she was not in her bed. There was no CCTV on site and no guard on patrol at the resort. Innocent searches was carried out by the family, who was later joined by the staff of the resort and other tourists before the other agencies involved in. Hence, for me, it is impossible in this kind of case and circumstances to have a precise direction and time of Nora N before she was found at the palm oil plantation. Even the sniffer dogs and hundreds of searchers were unable to trace her. I would like to quote what was said by Dr. Siu on the nature of the palm oil plantation where the body was discovered. But those are very difficult terrain. You have to really climb down, and after that, even the police, when they brought us there, they lost the location. So those are difficult terrain. I'm not able to answer you because on the ordinary area, 10 days, you should move quite a lot of distance, but those are difficult area. Even when I climbed down, also it was with the very big difficult, even the police missed the location of the deceased body. So I'm not able to answer you because I do not know how her personally. I've been knowing her for, if I have been knowing her for some time, I can estimate, but this is difficult because I don't know her until the post-mortem. So I'm not able to answer this with certainty, but those are very difficult areas to move around. It's not really easy to move around like a city or something, but it's difficult. Next. This is an excerpt of the post-mortem report in relation to marks of injury found on Nora N by Dr. Siu and Dr. Hanif. I did highlight the injuries to the foot. Okay, next. No, before that. Okay. So according to Dr. Siu, the injuries are consistent with Nora N walking on barefoot in the jungle. Only Nora N could tell in great details what was happening in the jungle and which area she was in. As for us, we could only be able to make inferences based on the proof facts, and the best inference that we could make is based on Dr. Siu's testimony when he was asked how much Nora N would have been moving in view of her condition. Next. If she at the area, it would be very difficult for her to move furthermore. If you at the final, because she has all the problem with her thing, but if you, because they will have to climb down, I think please play apa ni Amirul, clip video 14 just to get the clearer statement from Dr. Siu.
Number 0578. Number 05789448, dated 15 August 2019. Number 4 is an entomology report, refer Institute of Medical Research, National Institute of Health report with reference number IPP/EF.075/2019.
Ni 14. Amirul, cuba cepatkan.
The Medical Institute for Medical Research received 2 bottles of specimen on the 16th August at 5:05.
Tak apa, I will read the statement. If she at the area, it would be very difficult for her to move further. If you at the final, because she has all the problem with her team, but if you, because they will have to climb down there, and after that, there was a little plateau there. If she landed a plateau area, it should be difficult to move around there because because if you are all the suffering and her disability and the pain, she would be quite restricted in that area. It is really difficult to answer you, but in view of her disability to movement problem and all that, I will anticipate she would just at that area, not far away from it. But I'm not able to answer exactly because I don't know her when she was alive. Next. So it was put to this court that if Nora N died on 9th August 2019 or 10th August 2019, then this raises the question as to why she was not found when the area was searched on the 7th, 8th and 9th of August 2019 and tried to relate to the involvement of a third party. We already know that Nora N was a mild HPE child with her own limitation. This includes her balancing, coordination, and tiredness level. According to Mr. Reeve, Nora N still tired easily in many areas. Hence, based on this proof fact, it could be reasonably inferred that she was not on constant move. The reason she could not be found would be the nature of the jungle, which could lead to the possibility of overlooking the body in undergrowth. See Dr. Siu and Dr. Keris on this. Dr. Siu and Dr. Hanif had done all their level best to really look for evidence if it involves sexual assault, but there was none to suggest. Video clip 15.
Selected at post-mortem examination confirmed for us.
Fighting with some degree of autolysis and they did not demonstrate any further significant pathology. In summary of the postmortem, the body was identified by SP Rashid bin Qasim as the above named person prior to postmortem examinations. Postmortem examination revealed the body has undergone postmortem changes. The estimated time of death based on the postmortem changes is about 2 to 3 days, but less than 4 days. This is based on the postmortem changes. Washerwoman sign was seen on both feet and hands, such as if these body parts were immersed in the water. Multiple injuries were found on the external examination. These injuries are not fatal in nature. These injuries were caused by friction with objects like tree branches, rocks, sands, etc., etc. The hymen of the deceased was intact despite of decomposition changes. No obvious injuries seen on external genitalia despite decomposition artifact. The dissection of the face, periorbital area, and lips show no obvious injuries suggest of smoothing. Extensive dissection of the skin done to examine the subcutaneous fat and the muscle for injury. No obvious grip marks or struggle marks seen on all limbs. However, there was a small bruises at the...
Okay, I think I will read the statement by Dr. Siu. I think it's very important. Yes, we have. I have the interview with the parent to get the background of the disease. Of course, we are really looking for those evidence on the body. Looking forward with assaulted sexually, we are really looking for those. We agree those really highly risk of the sexual assault. We were looking for those, but however, just on the postmortem, I could not find it. I don't deny I could not. It could not exist, but I just don't find it to say it was there at the time of postmortem, because we do understand the girl a bit needs dependent. She has all the characteristics. We are looking for those evidence at heart. That's why you see we send a lot of specimen. This not usually we do for postmortem. You see we send the specimen, we send a lot of sample. Sample we send a lot, hoping they will get something. I still agree if possible, but my evidence is not with you. My evidence is not sure, but I agree possible, but I don't have the evidence to say it is there, But I agree these are the highly target for this type, but I don't have the evidence for my postmortem. Okay, we look hard and we look a lot extensively. You can see the postmortem. Actually, it is not a simple postmortem. We do extensive to try to look at least one evidence. If I got one, I can use a loud sound saying yes, but I don't have one. So possible you are right, but I don't have anything to say it is. After the postmortem on the 15th, we think we need to go to the scene to expand those injuries on her legs and her and because there are so many scratch marks caused by the tree branches. So we want to know how she can get those injuries. That's why we ask the police to bring us to visit back whether this injuries pattern is tally with the injuries sustained when she was there, or maybe she want to make sure those injuries she sustained over the area and not people inflict on her. We actually want to see whether she was still walking or not. I mean, those are things she was standing alive and still walking. So we are interested to the area whether she was walking or not, and she walking means she was not immediately dead after she missing. So we actually want to know whether she was walking around after those alleged missing period. We see those injury pattern is similar like those area we can see from the branches and all the prickles from the area. So next, the conclusion. So after hearing all the relevant evidence, I ruled that there was no one involved in the death of Nora, and it is more probable than not that she died by misadventure, i.e. she had gone out of the Sora house on her own and subsequently got lost in the abandoned palm oil plantation. For me to speculate and presume of her action and involvement of third party without any proof fact would be a breach of my duty. So the inquiry is hereby closed. That's all from me. Okay, thank you.
Terima kasih, Wan.